We just try to get out and talk to people and listen to people. We started in Sinclairville, we went over to Gowanda, and now we're here, and I appreciate Limestone opening up for us to host us. And our county legislators are here. Carl, introduce yourself. And Dave's here. So Carl and Dave from the county legislator. Did we miss any other local officials?
Yes, Bruce Hudson, who I have not introduced you to.
Hi.
All right, Bruce, there we go. New supervisor?
I'm getting there.
Yes, sir.
What for?
For the town of Carlton, yes.
Ah, town of Carlton. All right, so our supervisor from the town of Carlton. So we appreciate you.
And we also have a board member here, at least one board member I saw.
Jim Stoddard, town board member.
Ah, there's Jim,
We've got the
okay.
town judges here.
I saw Mike on the way.
Right,
in.
yep.
Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, yeah. Hey, step right up.
Doug Wilson, board member of Hinsdale.
In Hinsdale.
Oh,
Doug's-
it's a club.
That's right in the area. And we have Cassidy here, who is one of our youth representatives, future president of America.
Chair of the youth board.
Chairman of the youth board?
Yeah.
All right, I like it.
I'm not an elected person, but I'm representing our school district. I'm Karen Nealon, superintendent of schools.
Oh, thank you, Karen, for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. We had a great roundtable in Chautauqua County yesterday with our superintendents, administrators, teachers on school safety. So maybe we can talk a little bit after this, because trying to do the resource officers and other things, emergency preparedness, and maybe give you some information. You can give me some information. What's going on in the community. Well, and actually on the impact day, but that would be Salamanca School District we were able to help with, and I'm glad we were able to help with that 1.6 million to alleviate the real property tax burden here in the backyard because of that impact day issue. We do the written questions, but by no means that we're probably going to go through most of the questions or issues, but we do it just to keep track of everything, and in the sense of if we run out of time, we have an ability to get back to you if we don't get to the item that's mentioned on the written question. But as we found in the small groups, we just kind of free flow of the conversation, and we'll try to cover as much as we possibly can. Joe, you want to introduce yourself and the people helping here?
There's a lot of familiar faces here, but I'm Joe Sembolinski. I'm Congressman's district director. So I run our 5 offices in New York. Half our staff's up here in New York State, the other half's down at the Capitol. So if anybody needs anything, you'll see me around, but you'll also see the lady standing to my left here around, probably even more.
Lee James, and I work out of the Olean office, and I am privileged to work with all of you and assist with any of your needs with FEMA, student loans, insurance issues, and the Postal Service. And we certainly could direct you to anyone else for any other needs that you may have.
Oh, thanks.
We're Lee is right in downtown in Olean and Bluebird Square. And that's the closest office to here.
Well, and just maybe a quick update from Washington, and then we'll get right into the conversation. I was down in D.C. on Thursday, came home. We're going to go back on Monday. My wife and kids live in Corning, so I go back and forth. I drive back and forth every week, and I always love coming home. And I appreciate the warm welcome sign on the way in. You see a name like, your name up in the lights there.
We're going to take a picture of that for you.
I appreciate that. And we were just, like I said, in Gowanda, and I so appreciated being home because we went by the movie theater up there, and it said, "Happy 100th birthday, Don Campbell." So, and Don wanted to wish your birthday. But that's who we are. That's just how we are here in this area. So it's just, thanks for the warm welcome to have us. Right now in D.C., we just, some good news. Farm bill. We got the farm bill taken care of. The president signed it. That's a 5-year bill. We did a lot of work trying to get that 5-year bill put together. I think we got some real solid reforms in dairy pricing in particular, our crop insurance program, and our specialty crop program. I think we made some real steps in the right direction there. On the other side of the bill, there was the food stamp reforms that I think are going to go a long way to streamlining that process and making it much more efficient and effective, and get the resource to the people that need it most. And those are the people that really we're trying to allocate the resource to, rather than keep expanding and developing that program and try to root out the waste, fraud, and abuse in it in particular. I was disappointed to see the reforms in the work requirement that we supported with the food stamp bill, because I think just so everybody knows where that comes from, I supported those work requirements because I'm really trying to support policies out of Washington in this area that teach people how to fish, not just give them a fish. And so if we're going to provide a benefit, a social welfare benefit, it makes perfect sense to me to say, look, either you're going to get a job, you're going to go to school, get a certificate or a degree that puts you in a better position to get a position of employment, or even volunteering in our community. And just so you understand also that the work requirement that we talked about in the food stamp bill was for able-bodied adults without kids. So we were just talking about people that had no children and were physically capable of having to comply with this requirement for receiving food stamps. And I'll tell you, it was about $20 billion worth of savings that would have produced based on the scoring that was out there. And it was very frustrating to me to hear the calls and the complaints. Like, people called, and I was called every name under the sun. Now, how can you take food out of people's mouths? How can you do this evil thing? You don't have a heart. And what I would say in response is I stood for those because I care about people. And if you're going to care about people, you're going to empower people to be in a position to take care of themselves rather than having to wait on the government, be dependent on the government. We need to break that cycle. So that didn't get to the finish line, but I think we at least started the debate that there's more of us in Washington that are going to start standing for these kind of common sense type of reforms. And hopefully we'll have some success there. Recently also, the Congressional Budget Office came out with its report on the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, have you. 2.5 million less jobs is what the independent referees are telling us based in that report. But there's something in that report that I also want to stress to you that's not getting as much attention, and I'm sure we're going to get into things with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. But it's the portion of the report that talks about like the long-term spending and debt crisis that America's facing. And we gave you, I don't know if everybody has handouts here. There you go, thanks, Joe. Oh, all right. So we usually have some handouts, but this is one. I got coffee all over, so I apologize. But
Same one from last time.
This is the CBO's projection of the interest payment on our debt between now and 2024. And I spend a lot of time in regards to that because of the monster that I think it is, and how it's really destabilizing America and jeopardizing America's future. But this chart is based on some very conservative estimates by the Congressional Budget Office, and that by 2024, we're going to have to pay interest on our debt of $880 billion. Now, just to put that in perspective, and we use this pie chart a lot of times we go to, because I think it does a nice job of breaking down where the money goes. But we're spending $3.6 trillion every year. And right now, the interest on the debt is averaging about $223 billion, $233 billion in the last fiscal year. But the point, if it goes up to $880 billion like projected in 2024, which is right around the corner, just please take a moment to try to comprehend the size of that increase. All of our defense spending, we spend $670 billion on. You know, everything in Social Security, $768 billion. So if you got to come up with $880 billion to service that debt by paying the interest payment, you can imagine where that's going to set us, because how are you going to cover that? How are you going to cover that payment? So that's why I bring up the debt quite a bit, because it's that crisis that is right on the horizon. 2024 is not that far away. And so we gotta have this conversation as an American society of how we're going to get the fiscal house of the federal government under control. One of the key solutions, I think, to this is not only about reducing the federal government, getting it into its constitutional-based format, and being that limited federal government that I think our founding fathers envisioned, but also if we can get people back to work, if we can create the jobs of today and tomorrow. I'm telling you, I firmly believe we have a great opportunity in front of us in regards to our manufacturing rebirth in America. We can build it here, sell it there. There's a lot of good things going. Our energy resources, our energy development. I've been supportive of the natural gas and the development of it in a safe and responsible way. If we can get people back to work, that's going to go a long way to helping us out. Not only is it going to get more people, taxes and all that stuff, but you lessen the burdens on government all the way through. Because if people are empowering themselves and they're taking care of themselves, there's less pressure on the system, so to speak. So for a twofold reason, I think that's got to be the number one issue going forward, is growing a healthy economy and also getting that debt under control. So with that, we'll cover some written questions and then we'll have the conversation.
Or so if anybody has written questions that haven't come up here yet, flag Lee or myself down, we'll get them. But we have a couple of questions regarding the president and some perhaps allegations of executive overreach. Bruce asked, what's the status of the IRS action on certain 501c3 organizations? That was also asked by another gentleman in the context of other investigations. Benghazi, he criticized the president's...
Yeah, come on. How are you? Go ahead, Joe.
smidgen of corruption,
Come on
that
in,
he
Brett.
said. And whether or not the executive branch has usurped its powers by changing standing law, selective enforcement, whatnot. So there's some concern in the crowd about the executive branch.
Well, I don't think it's going to surprise many of you, but I share that concern. So I don't know who asked the question and who's submitting the question, but what the president is doing, in my opinion, is going way beyond things that historically where presidential authority has gone, and it's an expansion of presidential authority. And we're putting a spotlight on it, and we got to hold them accountable. And it's really incumbent upon all of us to stand firm and just say this isn't what our checks and balances system was all about. The good news, and I'm the eternal optimist, the good news is a lot of members in the House that I talked to on both sides of the aisle, when you raise the concern of, look, he's not going to be president forever. And you're going to get a president that you may disagree with using those same exact presidential powers he's establishing now in a way that you don't agree with. And I'll tell you, the light bulb, this is, I think, a very persuasive argument. The light bulb goes off and a lot of guys say, you're right, we got to hold this in check. So I think there's some internal grumblings going on here on the president, on the other side of the aisle that's causing some concern also. And I think that's good. And we're just going to continue to hold them accountable and get into it. IRS, the investigation is still going. I don't know if you saw, we had the new commissioner of the IRS in front of us not too long ago, last week. We were asking some questions and getting into the question of the no smidgen of corruption comment. You know, as I asked the new commissioner, I was like, you know, do you think that was responsible given that there are 6 investigations going on, full-blown investigations? We don't have the conclusions. We haven't gotten to the end of those investigations. How can you come to the conclusion as the commander-in-chief that there's no smidgen of corruption in this area? And so there was some good recognition by the commissioner that we need to get to the bottom of it. And that's still progressing and it's going further. Benghazi was the other question I think came up. I signed on to the select committee. I think we're at the point in the Benghazi situation that a select committee makes some sense. I'm hesitant in the other areas yet to support this select committee because just so everyone knows how that works and what the concern I have about it comes from. When you sign on to support a select committee, remember that's a whole new committee and it's an independent committee and that is going to cause a lot of delay because you have to go through the whole learning process again, and also millions of dollars get spent in those independent committees because they get their own staff, they get new appointments, they go through that learning curve, and also the new committee is populated by new members. So a lot of the standing committees, like our committee, the oversight committee, you know, Dare Iceland's committee, that is doing this work, has regular members on there that are kind of blocking and tackling and getting into it and putting their shoulder into it. Sometimes with the independent committees, because the minority gets an opportunity, the majority gets it out there, Republicans, Democrats get to appoint new people to it, they'll put people on the committee that are there not to get to the bottom of it, but to stonewall it, to get their 5 seconds of fame on the headlines and really try to divert the task of the committee to getting into the real fundamental issues of finding out what went on. So just bear that in mind, because a lot of people I see in DC, they run to the select committee, independent committee immediately, and that's really, it has problems with it. So I don't know who asked the question, but does that answer the question? Does that answer the question?
Pretty close. I was kind of curious about getting an independent council assigned to perhaps do some of that looking in rather than maybe a select committee or something. That was very popular back in the 80s, assigning those guys to look into Oliver North and things like that.
Independent counsel.
Yeah, independent counsel, I think it'd be an excellent way to get to the bottom of some of this stuff, because the people the president are assigning to do that job now are partisan. And frankly, that's if you investigate yourself, you're not going to find anything wrong. And I don't have any confidence in them to begin with.
I appreciate that. Well, we'll take the independent counsel input. Let's see where we go. All right, Joe?
This is Elizabeth. I would like to see more energy and commitment into raising the minimum wage to $10 an hour and lifting the ceiling on wages subject to Social Security tax. I'm self-employed. 100% of my wages are subject to Social Security tax.
All right, Elizabeth?
That's me.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Minimum wage, that's a conversation that's going on right now, obviously. I've been raising the minimum wage with the national economy where it's at. My gut tells me to increase those costs, to go down that path may be problematic at this time. However, I have recognized that minimum wage hasn't been addressed for many years. Is there a time to recognize that inflation and the cost of the dollar and that type of thing is something to have a fair debate on? So I'm open to the debate, but just understand where I'm coming at that debate from, where there's a hesitancy for me to jump into it and say, yeah, we have to do this. This is the right thing to do now. One concept that has gotten some attraction, and it's gotten attraction from me, is the concept of letting local communities make that determination. Because I am a big fan of states' rights and local government being the government best suited to make decisions for their people rather than one size fits all out of Washington, D.C. And why I bring that up also is because, just look here in New York State, for example. You raise minimum wage to $10.10, I think is what the president's talking about, and some other folks are talking about. Raising it to $10.10 in Limestone and $10.10 for Manhattan, two different worlds, two different power of the dollar and all that type of thing. So does it make some sense to say, if you want to do it at the local community, go ahead and do it at the local government level, and what you're going to raise it to, in your community versus another community, maybe that's the better way to go about it.
Well, that's a good strategy, providing the business person wants to pay their person a just wage. My argument with your reasoning is that, first of all, you just said that you'd like to put a lot of people to work.
Mm-hmm.
Making the job, $8 an hour, even $8 an hour for people to work at a 40-hour, 50-hour week is better than a livable wage, even in this community, where things are really cheap. You want to take the burden off the government. Well, I think it seems to me that all the arguments I hear coming out of Washington on both parties, I'm either Democrat or Republican, is that everybody wants to make sure the burden's not on business, big business. I'm really frustrated with that. I'm about as small business person as you can get. But I pay, like I said, 100% of my wages go into Social Security. I realize there's a cap on Social Security wages. So if you make I think it's $115,000 now, you do not pay the normal Social Security wages if you make more than $115,000. I probably, by the time everything is paid, I make less than $22,000 a year. 100% of my wages are 15.3% on Social Security. And plus, I pay my employee Social Security.
Yeah, their share of it.
I pay, given the salary that I make, I pay my employees anywhere from $11 to $16 an hour, because I know that is a just wage for the work that they do. Does it affect my bottom line? Hell yeah, there is no bottom line. So I get very frustrated in all the jargon around why we should not raise the minimum wage. $10 an hour is still nothing in this area. When you think rents in Olean and Allegheny now are $5.75. So yes, somebody in Manhattan getting $10.10 an hour, obviously that's going to be tons less in this area as far as what real estate goes for. But the problem is we're putting that decision in the hands of often business people. big business people whose profits, I don't, they could get upset if they're not making 20 million versus the 10 million.
Well, it's interesting, okay, so let's talk about maybe 2 points there. One, paying a fair wage and what is a living wage and what is a fair wage, that is a conversation that I think we've been having for a long time, and is that something we as government officials can really
Yes.
arbitrarily say?
Yes, I think you should help with it.
Okay, no, and where I'm going is what do you judge to be a fair wage? I mean, what one person considers fair, someone else is gonna say is unfair. And I would think it's also problematic to say that employers don't want to pay their employees. As a small business person, as you as a small business person, I took my employees as part of my family. And as I'm sure you, as we've met with the Pippins over here, you know, they look at their employees as an investment. And it's not about paying the cheapest amount. It's about what is going to be the right thing to do, provide for employees, and have that investment return that you're giving to your personnel. So to say that people want to pay the least amount, I get a little touchy on that,
Okay,
push
I'm
back.
not talking about people like me who are involved in it. I'm talking about people like Walmart, Kmart, restaurants that pay barely $2 an hour because we're supposed to, everybody's supposed to tip and make sure.
See, and this is where growing the economy and creating a healthy economy, and that's why like I always go back to the energy as the best example. So there's development of natural gas that's happening across North America, and that we've been supportive of. We think we can do it safely and responsibly.
Fracking.
The hydrofracking that's developed and had that resource as a real viable source. Does anybody, so North Dakota right now is kind of the heart of that energy birth. How much do you think Taco Bell is paying folks to work at Taco Bell as a frontline server?
Walmart's starting out like $18 an hour.
$18 an hour in North Dakota.
We're starting out.
$19 an hour to $20 an hour at Walmart, North Dakota, Taco Bell. So you talk about the service industry paying the nominal amount. You have a healthy economy. The laws of free market principles, in my opinion, will go a long way to drive that wage up. Because if you have a healthy economy and people are competing for that workforce, they're going to make sure they're making the right investments and they're going to pay $18, $19, $20 an hour. Rather than government coming in and saying, you know what, one size fits all, it's $20 an hour across the government. That's an easy political sell. That's a great headline. But are we really accomplishing what we want to accomplish? Because what also is going to happen if you shock the system and raise those costs? Because remember, it's not just the minimum wage impact that's going to occur. You go from, up to $8, $10 an hour on the minimum wage scale. Everybody else who's working in those businesses and in that supply chain are going to say, wait a second. They're getting paid now the same amount as I was. I am. So therefore, I need a raise. So the people up the pay scale are also going to say, we got to raise the wages
But
too.
that is the system right now. The states still can raise their minimum wage above the national minimum wage. That's the way it is right now.
No, and that's why if you're going to make the decision on raising the minimum wage, I think it's a fair argument, and it has been getting a lot of attraction to let the local states and local governments have the authority to determine what's appropriate for their community. But my point is, the employment costs are not just to the minimum wage earner that goes from $7.25 to $8, and you got 75 cents per hour of increased cost to the employer. It's more than that, because it's the other people up the wage scale that are going to say, hey, we just went from $7.25 to $8, and I was making $8 before, so therefore I should get a pay check of $8.75 an hour. And so those costs of employment costs are going to go up. And if we're going to have the economy in the state that it is right now, where it's kind of where I think we're on a path to recovery, but do you want to go down that path and potentially adversely impact it? That's the debate. So
Well, I'd just like you to include my comments in your debate.
I appreciate that.
I think sometimes what happens in Washington is everybody claims that they know what's happening, but they don't. Everyone claims to think that they feel our pain, but they don't. And that's why I'm saying, you're here to listen. I appreciate it. There are some people who disagree with you in your district.
Totally, and that's why we do these town halls. That's why I get out there and I go throughout the entire district, because I want to hear all the different points of view. But at some point in time, I do have to take a position, and I do have to weigh everything in.
What is your position on capping Social Security?
Capping Social Security, we're open to removing that cap on Social Security. But please understand what we're talking about there. Because I've heard this. This is a talking point that people on the other side of the aisle have used 1,000 times, saying, you just want to protect the rich people. You just want to keep the cap on Social Security because you don't want the rich people contributing to Social Security. Just so we're clear, I'm open to removing that cap, but you have to also have the conversation about the benefit calculation with that cap removal. So how does Social Security work? Does everybody know how Social Security works? I would assume, right? You contribute into Social Security with your payroll taxes. You're paying the person who's ahead of you. And then your benefit is based on how much you put into the system. The system was designed to essentially, you put your money in, you get your money out. And that's why it's a trust system. That's why it was kind of always considered to be a separate item, so to speak. If you remove the cap and take it to the extreme, say there's somebody making $100 billion in the U.S. economy right now, just a W-2 earner of $100 billion. What kind of benefit calculation are you creating on the Social Security lines as a result of that contribution? You're creating $100 billion worth of future liability, because if he or she is contributing $100 billion to the system, he or she should get a benefit equivalent to $100 billion when they qualify for Social Security. So, the question, Elizabeth, that I would pose to you, if you're going to remove the cap, you have to have the conversation on the benefit calculation. And if you have the conversation on the benefit calculation, and trust me, we've been into this issue with Medicare, how Tom and the Republicans want to destroy Medicare as we know it. We're trying to preserve Medicare, but most importantly on Social Security, you have fundamentally changed how Social Security was designed and created. Because you're no longer honoring the promise of you put your money into the system and then you get your money out. What you're doing is you put your money into the system and you're going to get a very small amount of your money back. That's a different Social Security system than what we've envisioned from the 30s and FDR.
Well, I agree with you. I'll just say one more thing, I'll get to the other questions. Social Security, as it was funded, it's already changed in how many ways? Because Social Security was originally established for retirement, and since then we dipped into people who have children without parents, with disabilities, which I totally support all of that. So it's not now existing as it was originally intended. So that I put my money in, and only those who put our money in will get to retire. No, not other people are taking the money because that's what the whole idea of social. We need to take care of the community people. So it's already something that never was before.
It has expanded.
I
No,
don't
definitely.
think, but it has expanded, it exponentially has expanded. And plus the fact that it's been borrowed from the years, and this whole bunch, like a couple trillion is missing from it.
Elizabeth is touching on something that I'm so glad you bring up, because you're bringing up Social Security disability and the other expansion of the program. And we borrowed from the Social Security fund. They used it for other purposes and all that type of thing. That's why some people yell at me when I talk about Social Security as part of the debt issue. They'll say, well, you shouldn't talk about Social Security. It has nothing to do with the debt. Yes, it does. Because we borrowed from the Social Security fund, and we have to pay those bonds back to Social Security. And if we can't afford to make those payments, Social Security is one of those creditors that's in line going, where's my money? And we better take care of Social Security. So that's why we have to talk about it. But disability, Social Security disability. Does anybody know when that goes underwater, when that goes bankrupt? Anyone? You know, general Social Security is about 2033. That's where all the reports come out and they say, if you don't do anything, you maintain the status quo, Social Security will be out of money in 2033, 2034, you could have an argument. But Social Security disability, January 1st, 2016. If we maintain the status quo on Social Security disability, we're looking at about a $40 billion shortfall in the Social Security Disability Fund that comes January 2nd, 2016. In order to make that up, every Social Security disability check is going to go out with 20% less, right from the get-go. And it gets worse. It doesn't get better with age. So when we have the conversation of don't talk about Social Security, it has nothing to do with the debt, it has nothing to do with all those issues, what? That's wrong. So you got to have the conversation now about how we're going to fix it. So the conversation that really needs to be had, some of the reforms that we're talking about is that we've been supportive, is what is the disability that we're really trying to protect in Social Security disability? The original intent, if you look back at what the history of Social Security was, the intent was really those folks that were really catastrophic, disabled, couldn't get a job anywhere in America. It was really tailored to be a narrow program to to really help the worst off amongst us. Now you've seen it expand, and you watch, I mean, you've seen the ads on TV. I mean, how many attorney ads have you seen that it's Social Security disability, Social Security disability, Social Security disability?
Right.
They're pushing the program, and the problem, if we don't do anything, is the people that it was designed to protect are going to go without. And that's wrong. That's not right. So we got to narrow in that, in my opinion, some of those disability terms and some of those resources there. Yeah, okay.
Just to clarify, when you're talking about pay in and pay back on Social Security, what's the time frame that if you put in $100 million, how long do you have to get that $100 million out? How do they base that?
Well, the first moment you're going in, I mean, the first day you put it in, I mean, obviously, but when you say...
Well, I mean, like, say if you retire if you start collecting at 62, they must say, okay, well, you put in so much money, it's going to take you how many years to get it back out?
Well, if you put it in at 62, then I don't know. I mean, that would be the reforms as to how you're going to change the benefit calculation for those people. And that's why I've been open to taking the cap off. You have to have the benefit calculation reforms too with it, because what they're looking to do, they're trying to infuse cash into the Social Security trust fund. And if you take the cap off and you say, nope, the max benefit you're going to get is at $106,000, say they just left it there, you're going to get a tremendous amount of cash infused in, and that could stabilize the account. Now, is that something we should do? That's something, you know, we can't even, it's very difficult to have the conversation about Social Security in Washington, D.C. without getting little me going up to the gorge and throwing grandma off into the cliff. It's so foolish, the political debate that we get into in Washington. But the point is, I guess that would be part of the reforms, when you're going to cap it, how you're going to calculate the benefit, when does it start, when doesn't it. A lot of this stuff, in my opinion, you can phase in, and I think that's the right approach to it. So when we say things like, anybody who's 45 and younger, you're not going to have an impact in regards to how Medicare is set up, Social Security is set up. You're off the table. What was promised to you at that point in time, snapshot, that's what you're going to get. Because that makes some sense to me. And it's not an arbitrary number. It's based on math. And it also is a long enough time period. If I'm 45 and younger, I still have a little bit of time to adjust my retirement plans, as opposed to waiting and doing nothing. And then you're getting the people that are 60, 61, 62 put on the table, because that's all you have left. And that's why having a conversation now is so much more better, so much better than waiting on this issue. All right, let's cover a couple more.
We've got about 4 written questions left here. So I think this is in the context of Second Amendment, if I'm reading it correctly. If the feds can violate my HIPAA rights to make America safe, would it be possible to see President Obama's birth certificate and or college transcripts? I'm guessing that's in the context of the Second Amendment.
A little cynical, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe if you want to elaborate on that.
Actually, you said HIPAA, that would probably be healthcare, right?
Well, I think that there has been some concern with HIPAA about people looking into mental status. Whether you
I got you.
That's how I was interpreting it. So.
Yes, that's very right.
That is the problem.
That is a, well, and this is, first of all, on the Second Amendment, I think we've been very clear. Everyone knows where we stand. It's an individual fundamental right. We're going to stand with the Second Amendment. The bigger issue in regard to this item, violence, school violence, the stuff that happens in Colorado, there's not a soul that I've come across that anyone said in any way didn't empathize with that situation. I mean, I have met victims of people that were subject to gun violence, that lost their kids. I mean, your heart goes out to them. And they come in and they say, well, we want you to ban the gun. And I'm like, banning the gun, it's not going to take care of the problem. Because the common theme in each and every single one of these cases, and I don't care what it is, it's either mental health or it's criminal activity. That's what my gut tells me. That's what the studies I read tell me. That if you're going to really do something about this issue, you have to get to the criminal activity in America, and you have to get to the mental health system in America and how we deliver it. So then it begs the question, then why are people coming in, we'll ban the gun and infringe on our Second Amendment rights, and that will take care of it? Because it's easy. Because it's easy. Because the gun can't talk back. The gun's an object. And they say, well, if you get rid of this, then of course we're all going to be protected and we're going to be safe. The harsh reality is, you can ban anything, it's still going to be out there. Bad guys are gonna do bad things. So why don't we focus our efforts and our resources on the root cause of the problem, which is mental health and criminal activity in America? So then it begs the question, just take the debate that you're touching into here. The HIPAA and mental health and how to protect our privacy. At the same time, you want to make sure that someone who's in that situation is not using a weapon in a horrific way. That's a tough question. And how are you going to make sure that someone doesn't have the authority as an unscrupulous doctor to say, well, Tom Reed, he's got mental health issues, he should lose his constitutional rights to the Second Amendment? You got to set up the mechanisms for the due process, the oversight, the review, and things like that. It's a tougher debate, and it's something that we have to have. But
That's happened in New York State already.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing in New York, obviously New York's gone the whole way with the SAFE Act and,
Yeah.
Just banning the weapon and doing that. We don't support that approach. I want to take on a big issue. And that's why criminal activity. You will hear no argument from me in regards to federal legislation. There's some federal penal law provisions, criminal law sanctions out there. If you use a gun and you engage in drug activity, there should no be pass and go collect $200. See ya. Mandatory, out of our society, sitting in jail, going to prison. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's a reasonable approach to it. And then if you did that, think about it. If you did that and you took, because if you look at most of the inner city type of gun violence, common theme there. Most individuals, when they use a gun in an inner city type of criminal activity and someone gets hurt from it, they've had prior law enforcement contact 1 or 2 or 3 times. So doesn't that beg the question, why are they not in jail?
Right.
And how much can you prevent by enforcing those laws and saying, hey, you've already demonstrated you're going to use a weapon in an unlawful way? I'm sorry. Go on, pay the price. I think that goes a long way to minimizing some of that gun violence in America. All right, Joe.
All right, we got a couple more written questions coming in, so we'll try and keep moving along here. Kathleen, what did you vote, and what are your views on military retirement? I'm guessing that's in context of Ryan Murray budget pension situation. Why not reduce Congress and Senate's retirement?
Yeah, this was a tough. One of the recent votes that was a tough vote. I supported the Ryan Murray budget agreement. I voted in favor of it. And one of the big concerns I had was the impact on military retirement benefits. But when you're presented the whole package and you have to make a decision one way or the other, some guys probably wanted to press the yellow button, which is vote present, so you vote no or yes, and just kind of do that yellow. It's yellow for a reason, in the coward position, I think. But overall, the Ryan and Patty Murray budget made some great improvements in regards to getting mandatory spending into the conversation, stabilizing, getting away from the government by crisis, so we supported it. But I want to go back to that military retirement issue. And we've already addressed some of it. If you saw the disabled vets clearly taken off the table, so we made some headway there. Also, this is starting to percolate as part of this debt ceiling deal, just so we're all talking about it and seeing where we're at with it. The debt ceiling is going to have to be addressed by between now and end of February. And one of the things they're talking about is saying, let's fix this military COLA impact, retirement calculation, and get them taken care of and made whole. That's a tough, I'm very supportive of that. I'm going to stand with our vets. I'm the son of a 20-year Army veteran, World War II, Civil Star recipient, multiple Purple Hearts. Those guys earn those benefits. I'm very hesitant to do stuff that impacts them. So stay tuned. So I think there may be a path here where we take care of those military retirees. But I'll tell you, the problem there, on top of all this, you ask the question, why did they do it? Why did they do it to begin with? And this is the bigger question. The military adjustment on the retirement benefits was for people that were 40 to 62. And what happened is they said, we're going to reduce their retirement by 0.5% off the COLA adjustment, cost of living adjustment. And when they did that, they were thinking, okay, we're going to use that money to pay for the guys who are 62 and older who are receiving the benefit. The reason why? Because there is a liability problem. There's a debt out there where the people that are 62 and older, there's jeopardy to their funding for their pension liability. And so what they're doing is robbing Peter to pay Paul. Not a long-term solution, not sustainable, but that's kind of the mindset as to why they did it. They were moving it from there to there. And also, remember at the end of the deal, they made the individuals who suffered that reduction in their retirement benefit at age 62 whole. So they got an adjustment in their retirement check at 62 to make up for all the reduction that they suffered over the 40 to 62 period of time. It's way in the weeds, don't mean to bore you, but there's more to it than just the cursory, we cut the military veteran pay for no reason whatsoever. There was some reason to it. And when we fix it, we do need to also look at how we're going to fund the military retirement system and make sure those guys are taken care of, those men and women earn those benefits, and we're going to stand with them. That answer the question? Whoever asked it?
I did.
You did? Okay.
Yes, I did. Because we have a son who's been in it for 22 years. And most of that 22 years, he's been away from his family. Like you say, you like to have more in the family. And he spent 18 months out of his children's life in Iraq. And that was the third time. Twice in Afghanistan, twice in Africa, once in Bosnia. So, and then to talk about reducing the retirement that he earned, you didn't answer the second part. Why would they look at Congress or Senate? I mean, when they walk away after so many years of service with the retirement benefits that they receive, that very well could have helped the debt ceiling.
Well, by taking the money from the 40 to 62-year-olds and applying it to the 62-year-olds that were receiving the benefit at the time, that's why they were tied together. So they were taking the money from one group of military veterans to try to fund the veterans that were of 62 or age or older because they don't have an opportunity. The argument, they didn't have an opportunity to go get another job like the ones that are 40 to 62. They're going to have other potential resources to rely on. So that's where it came from. So I was trying to answer the second part of the question with the explanation of what the rest is. But your sentiment, I agree. When it comes to our vets, that's a whole different situation. We should stand with them. They've earned those benefits. And we have, being the son, again, of an Army veteran, it's personal. It's, when my father passed when I was 2, and my mom,
I was going to answer if he was still alive, or if he was alive, how would you feel about you voting for that and giving the benefit?
That was a tough vote. It was a tough vote because of that. I mean, and he passed when I was 2. I'm youngest of 12. There were 6 of us left in the household that my mom raised by herself. She raised us on a Social Security check and a military death benefit check. So if that cut occurred to my mother during that period of time, that has serious consequences. And that's where I empathize with that. And again, I had to vote on the whole package, not just that. It's easy to be able to vote no and go, well, I voted no because of this. And then not have a conversation about the rest of it. But that's where I think what we're doing, the strategy that we're deploying in our office, is we're going to go back. We got the disabled veterans made whole. I think there's another opportunity to make the rest of the veterans whole and say, look, there's other priorities. This is a priority. There's other areas we can go in. Congress, retirement packages, federal employee packages. Maybe there's something there that we could tap into. I'm open to that. And we'll continue to look at those.
Just a point of fact, the congressional retirement package is the same retirement package that non-military federal employees receive. It's not like they have a special retirement plan.
All that stuff been
some people,
and rightfully so.
they used to.
So the issue, the information out there, they say members get full health care for life and all that, first aid service and full salary. So that's all been reformed and good. I'm glad. What's good for me as a member of Congress is good for everybody else, and what's good for everybody else is good for members of Congress. So I think that's what Joe's trying to talk about.
If I read the name right, it says Pat. I'm disappointed that you are cutting programs like the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant, that will hurt communities doing infrastructure. The home program that would hurt elderly homeowners who need a bit of help for roofs and stuff. Cutting Social Security when most people have no other pensions. And other issues that impact residents of this district to give rich lawyers like you and other rich people tax breaks.
All right, I got big shoulders, so we'll take that. But understand what we're trying to do. I mean, we just had that roundtable yesterday with all the school districts, and I heard about the Taylor Street program, the wraparound program, all these different programs. All these programs are legitimate type, have great missions and everything else. But we have an $18 trillion debt. At Cassidy, you're on the hook for $56,000, Cassidy. You want to give me that check today, and I'll bring it back to the Jack Luke, the Treasury Secretary? You know? Is that right? Is that right? And then the rhetoric of, you know, Tom, you're a rich SOB, you know, you're a rich lawyer, blah, 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 and I got to pay my fair share and all those types of things. I get it, take it. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of rhetoric there. A lot of rhetoric. And it is amazing to me watching down in Washington, D.C., a lot of the guys talking about, well, the 1% have to pay their fair share. Even if you taxed them, just like the president was talking about before the whole thing that went down, it produces $60 billion worth of revenue, just on a score. You have about $1 trillion, at that point in time, about $1 trillion deficit you're running every year. That's less than 10%. So is that more about politics than it is about solving the problem? I would offer to you that that's not about solving the problem, that's about playing politics. And if you want to have the and if you want to have the conversation about, okay, you want to take the caps off Social Security and all those, I'm open to it, so long as we're fixing the problem. You know, one of the best conversations I had down in D.C. was with Bob Gates. That you know, he was talking about defense. I'm one of these guys. I've been one of the ones that said that we got to take a hard look at the defense lines. You know, they have to be scrutinized too. They got to all be part of this. Everything has to be looked at. But what he said resonated with me. He says, Tom, if we can find about 10% funding reductions in defense spending, I think we can do it. And we'll still fulfill the mission. Our men and women will be safe. We'll be able to take on the threats and the risk. But don't do what they do in Washington, D.C. Either get a tax increase that's more revenue coming in, or cut defense $60–70 billion and say, well, then let's expand this piece of the pie over here for a discretionary program, or let's expand the government over here. Says he's seen it all the years in D.C. It's a D.C. type of game, where they cut the spending here, expand the government over here. We got a net zero sum. We haven't solved the problem, and all you're doing is robbing from one to pay the other. The other issue is taxes come in. That's $60–70 billion. You know where they were going to spend it on programs. They're going to spend it on more programs. You have an $18 trillion problem, and this is where I get passionate about it. I get fired up about it because it doesn't end well, and it's not right. It's not fair for the next generation to put ourselves into this position. Go right ahead.
I mean, you said it's all rhetoric, but it's not rhetoric. I mean, I live here, and you know, this isn't a rich community. So if you cut the block grant program, it means that Carlton probably isn't going to get grant money for their sewer plant, which means they don't get any tax breaks, or not much of a tax break, because they don't have a lot of income in the community, and they're going to get hit with $50–60 a year per month per year for the next 30 years to pay for a sewer plant. Okay. So that's not rhetoric. That's robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's giving rich people a tax break and telling the poor people who live in Carlton and Salamanca and Corning, you've got to pay more money because you now have to bond for programs. It says to the little old lady who's owned a house for 20 years and is now living on Social Security and can't afford to fix a roof, you've got to go borrow $10,000 that you don't have because the home program and the block program aren't there. It's not rhetoric. It's hitting the pocketbooks of the people who live in this district.
And I hear that, and I listen. I'm listening. And the programs that make sense, the priorities like infrastructure, common agreement.
I mean, you used the block grant program when you were the mayor of Corning.
Absolutely.
And you used New York Main Street in your personal business in one of your buildings. I mean, you know, those programs are out there. They serve a
That's
good
not
purpose.
true, actually. It's the rhetoric. It's the political headline. It's not true. But I hear the attack, and go right ahead.
You know, it's something for this community, and it's something that we need in this community.
Yeah. No. So let's find the areas we agree on. Infrastructure. We're going to stand with you, and we're going to say there's a priority in infrastructure spending. Let's identify it and let's make it a priority. But to say that every program of the federal government is going to be maintained at the same level, if not expanded, is not sustainable. It's the easy political statement to make to you. And I will tell you that there's elected officials that would come in here and tell you. I had to deal with messes from prior elected officials where it was, got it done, checks in the mail. You know what they did? They started a construction project. Check never came. And that community suffered as a result of it. So trust and verify is what I would always say to you. But that's the reality of the situation. I wish I could give you the easy answer. I wish I could tell you what you wanted to hear. But I'm not going to do that. And elected officials from both sides of the aisle have been doing that for generations, and it's got us into this problem. And it's time to end it, in my opinion.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's time.
Just, I don't think anybody here expects us to have a carte blanche check to pay for everything. But I think from some of us are very concerned about how we see things being cut and who they affect, and how we see things being renewed. You just voted for this market access program and looked it up on the internet. That's basically, and I'm sure you'll disagree, but from everything I've read, that's basically corporate welfare. That does not really help our local farmers.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
Tell me how it's going to help our local
Yeah.
farmers.
What it is expanding is our local farmers. Take Chobani yogurt, for example, being made right in our local community with the
Do
dairy.
you realize that you're make it here, sell it there? That's the expression for that. And
Yeah.
that we have a very strong buy fresh, buy local.
Yeah. But do you realize that 95% of the world's consumers live outside of America's borders? And that if we're going to actually have the blossoming economy that I think we can have where we make it here and sell it there, you have to have access to those 95% of the world consumers that are outside of America's border. So the market access, New York apples, Concord grapes, being a potential export. I will tell you, we were over in, dealing with some folks that in the Korean area, for example. New York wine, huge opportunity for us. Because there's a mindset that is going on in the world where if you put made in America on it, it is like the thing. Hazlitt Winery is making huge investments up in Naples because of potentially the development of the Red Cap wine. Huge opportunity there. World Kitchen, I'll give you another example firsthand. World Kitchen, right in Corning, makes Corningware. Guess where the biggest market increase that they have is? China. China and Malaysia. You know why? Because for the upper, ones, the upper middle class in China and Malaysia, they give Corningware as their fine dining ware. And like when you come, so like when people get married, we all got what, Mikasa, Lennox, or whatever you want to call it. They give Corningware, and they can't produce the stuff fast enough. And I got like 10,000 plates of it up in the attic because I've been living there forever.
But there are 9 other programs that assist the foreign agriculture. That we don't need market exit program. It's just
Now you're joining in my conversation, which is great, Elizabeth. So what you want to do is consolidate those programs? So give me those 9 programs.
We need, like you're kicking out some programs.
We want to cut those programs.
Cut them.
Okay, that's great. And that's, if those 9 other programs you're referencing, I'm more than willing to take a hard look at those and say, let's cut
Those
them.
were already existing before you voted for another one to add to.
No, market access program was already existing. That wasn't new.
Oh, yeah, no, it was established in 1978, but
Yeah.
we're looking at things we need to cut. So
Yeah.
we're just saying that when we're looking at things that we need to cut, instead of looking at some of the things that affect the people in our area, so I would say tragically, that we can look at some of the areas that we can cut because there's already something existing. You're doubling up.
If you're saying we need to streamline the federal government because there's duplication of services and agencies, I'm going to agree with you 100%. And will you identify those? And that's why we do these town halls, so that if you have examples of those other 9 programs that need to be removed because they're duplicating efforts, give them to us. We'll carry that water all day long. I'm very interested in removing those duplicated services. But market access is impacting real farmers right here in our backyard, and it's an existing program. And I think that was a wise investment, because we were supportive of that, of positioning our agricultural interests to be able to compete on the world stage where they're making it here and selling it there. So, all right, what do you got?
3 more written questions here I think we can get through. We finally received the attention of Albany and have opportunities and possibilities for our region. The Buffalo Billion, which is some state money coming in.
Yep.
Is starting to form with projects. Without adequate infrastructure, we, our region, will be left out. I'm assuming that means the southern tier based on what goes next. In the 1970s, we were told of the 219 road as a development of the Toronto to Washington corridor. Can we see any assistance from Washington to help make this viable because it is still unfinished?
Yeah, we're working at
Mr. O'Connor.
Continental one is, the Route 219 is one of our top infrastructure projects that we've identified and made a priority. And we're going to continue to advocate and push for it. I think it makes sense. There's a return on the investment there. And there's a lot of benefit as a result of it. To tell you that we're going to get to the finish line in X number of days and that type of thing, I just can't tell you that because it's caught up in a whole bunch of reviews. It's caught up in a whole funding issue. But I hear that loud and clear. So it's Route 219. We just got I-86. We weighed in on that to get Route I-86 repaved, and they're doing that. They started that project, and we're going to continue to be strong partners there to get that road repaved. Needed to. It's becoming a real safety issue. We got the bridges done over on Route 15. So the Route 15 corridor to I-99. That's a success story that we've been able to promote. We were also heavily, when we had the old district, Kendrick Road up in Monroe County. We weighed in on and made some pushes there. So I just offer that to recognize I hear the need for Route 219, and I stand with it. Just as I do in Chautauqua County with the sewer districts around the lake and the water districts up in the north part. Infrastructure is something I think we should be able to come easily to an agreement on, stand with, and promote. Trick is getting the money.
Just a comment on that.
Yeah.
I think I moved to this area from Buffalo in 1966. I was 9 years old. I think that's about the time we started 219.
Yeah.
So it's been 48 years since I've been watching this thing crawl inch by inch from Buffalo down to Salamanca.
Yeah.
I mean, it's at a snail. I mean, I really appreciate your office working very hard to get that 219 corridor finished.
We're trying.
Before I die, I'd like to see.
It's definitely been a priority.
I'd like to see it hit Salamanca before I die.
All the way through.
Yeah.
You know, and they've had the wetland issues there. They've had the Native American issues. You know, there's been some need to reroute and things like that. So we've been trying, and I'll continue. But it's a snail's pace.
Yeah.
Wish things would happen faster.
Like I said, 48 years, maybe. I've been watching this thing.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
The pumping bill, just to clarify, doesn't have anything to do with the
Yeah, state.
It's state law. It's funds that come through NYSERDA from our GDI, which is an entity that's dipping into your pocket monthly in your utility. So you are paid, we are paid. But that's not your concern, that's the government.
Yeah, and it all comes back to funding, comes back to revenue. And in my humble opinion, a lot of folks not planning ahead, and now we're reaping what we sow from years of both sides of the aisle trying to do the easy thing, not taking on the hard issues. You know, I was very troubled last week to see the report come out of Albany where the state infrastructure bank is upside down now. You know, we're spending more on debt service payments in our state infrastructure bank than we are in actual construction projects and putting concrete and
That's what
steel.
we're headed for nationally.
That's exactly the point. That's exactly. So that should be the canary in the coal mine that we're all keeping an eye on to be ahead of. Yeah.
I guess my point in that question is whatever we can do to help with your efforts, we seriously want to see that happen because and we do know there's other funds coming into the Buffalo Billions, but we cannot be a player. We cannot be a viable community. There are wonderful advanced manufacturing projects and ideas happening that I see, and I try to get our kids prepared to be a part of it. But if people can't get to us, it won't happen. And I just feel like having been in Western New York all my years, I have seen this got forgotten over and over again. And I don't want it to get forgotten because it makes it harder for us as a region and for all of the other good programs happening to be connected if you physically can't get there easily.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that as I say this, it's not just me me speaking, I hear it in all kinds of groups and committees and meetings that I've been to, that if only we could, and that's the big part standing in the way, being able to get to us in that north-south route to get us connected. So whatever we can do to help you, let us know.
I appreciate that. And those
Don't
voices, that
forget
would be
us.
very good. No, guys, no. That infrastructure project makes a lot of sense, and it has the return on the investment. And I joined you. It's a priority, and we're gonna make the powers to be, the federal DOT, the state folks know that we want this to be in the mix of being funded and completed.
There's a pretty good consensus across levels of government now, the county guys are supportive of it, obviously. And, I know Senator Giglio and Senator Young are supportive of it.
We gotta get the money.
Yeah.
Figure out the money, how to, there's some interesting new ideas on money revenue we can talk about. Yeah.
This comment goes along with that. You started out talking about the looming debt crisis, but we have what could be a bigger crisis in our infrastructure. So how can you make those two things work together?
First of all, got to recognize the problem. And there's a lot of people that come in the office and come to Tom and say, Tom, the debt's not an issue. It's not a, Paul Krugman, Reed Krugman, you talk to Paul, he'll tell you, oh, it's no big deal. We can manage this debt and all that type of thing. So you got to change that debate. But we also can look at how we're going to get new revenue and also have the conversation of priorities in America. CDBG, priority. What is not a priority? Easy example. I've been supportive of foreign aid reductions. Foreign aid, we spend about $47 billion in foreign aid to foreign countries. Been supportive of reducing that. Take $4 billion, take $5 billion from those lines. A lot of people get real nervous when you start going down that path. Now, I am not a believer that we're going to get to zero on foreign aid. If there are allies we need to make investments in. The state of Israel, I'm a firm believer in. We're going to continue that relationship and those investments. But is there a time to say, you know what, it's time to focus on America, not foreign governments, and have a reduction there? Is there a way that we can take, let me throw one out at you, it's something we're toying with, the development of natural gas, right, in America. There's a whole debate coming in about exporting natural gas. The whole issue of we have so much and let's sell it on the open market. And a lot of people are like, no, we can't sell it, we should keep it all here and that type of thing. I'd offer you an idea that we've been supportive of. Why don't we come up with a fee structure that says when we export that natural gas, that fee goes with those export activities. And what then happens is that fee goes into our highway trust fund, which is running about $60 billion short a year, to rebuild America's infrastructure. The reason I like that is because now you have foreign buyers paying a fee for using their money to rebuild our infrastructure. So that's a whole new revenue line that could be potentially developed that's not coming out of U.S. hardworking taxpayers' dollars. Now,
That would probably be a drop in the bucket.
ooh, no, I think you could, you're talking pretty significant resource find that's in U.S. soil. Because I would also consider oil and natural gas the same way. And we start exporting oil and natural gas. So, will it bridge it? I don't know. We haven't scored it. I don't know what the actual score is on that number, but it would be a significant point. But my thought process is it's a new line. It's not one presently there. And I'm very interested in getting foreign dollars to invest in American infrastructure. I've even had a simple thing. There's about 100 million acres in our interstate highway system that go fallow. They're just, if you're out west in particular, you can actually see it here too on our interstate system. The medians and all that stuff. Right now they're a cost line on our budget because you got to maintain them, you got to mow them, you got to trim them back and all that type of thing. But it's about 100 million acres. We've asked in a resolution that we'd like to send over to the Department of Transportation, give us an economic study, take those 100 million acres, and what is the maximum economic use you could use for those acreage, and use the money that's coming off of that use to go into the Highway Trust Fund. Now that's going to be a very small number, but it's at least a step in the right direction, and it's new money. And where I got that from was talking to people that were over in Hong Kong. How Hong Kong goes a long way to improve its infrastructure. It sells its development rights off of its subway stops, and so there was this untapped resource that was there, and they got creative and they said, okay, we'll sell this and then we'll use it for a revenue line for their infrastructure. So we applied the same principle to the Palo plan. That's the kind of stuff that hopefully we're doing more and more of in Washington, and that's what I'm trying to do as part of teams down there to come up with solutions.
We got 2 more questions.
Oh, geez, I thought we were done. I'm sorry.
2 more. So, this came a little bit in the context of MAP, but how will the new farm bill affect family farms in Western New York? So you want me to elaborate on some of the other programs that will be helpful while you voted for the farm bill?
Yeah, no, other than the market access program we talked about before, bringing certainty to the agricultural community was something that I was and I heard quite a bit about. You know, farmers saying, oh my gosh, this 6-month Band-Aid, this 12-month extension, give us something that we can rely on. So that in and of itself will help our local farmers in regards to having a 5-year bill. That's why we were so strongly advocating for that, to give that certainty so people can plan a little bit better on our farms. The dairy reforms going to the margin insurance, I think that's going to be more, it's going to stabilize. Not the supply management way of doing dairy pricing, but for our dairy farmers in particular, it's a way to mitigate the risk and not have to be as dependent on government bureaucracy to manage the supply management system across America. So I think that's going to help our dairy farmers. There is some exciting investments being done in especially crop insurance, or especially crop research portions. And where we're supportive of that is the stuff coming out of corn, you know, creating the new crops, the disease resistant. There's a whole slew of exciting stuff over there, especially on the invasive species things that would impact our backyard here in the area. Trying to think what else in the farm bill that I could highlight.
Certainty is probably just the biggest thing.
Yeah, certainty. I mean, the grapes, that was a good thing. Anyway, copy that as some input.
We actually are done.
Oh, we're out of questions.
All right. Gentlemen, through the question.
Tom, I come to quite a few different meetings like this and get around a little bit. One thing that I notice that is lacking, I think, and I don't know how you would ever teach this, but so many people don't have common sense in their lives, or they don't value what common sense is. I mean, I don't feel personally that I'm overly intelligent or anything, but I've made all my decisions all my life on my common sense and have got myself to where I am today because of that. And I would like to say somehow, I would like to think that educators, could look at this facet of it and say, what can we do to help our kids instead of making the stupid decisions they make, point out how strongly it is with common sense. And that leads to another thing. Gentlemen discussed the fact about these old ladies and these old people that need this. I've been in rebuilding together for close to 30 years now. And I sit on the board and we evaluate the houses with a little bit of funds we had that were going to help. And over the years, I mean, I've seen people that I knew from 30 years ago that every night when they got done work, they went to the Elks Club and sat there and drank until they went home and they did that 7 days a week, and then they retired and they were broke. They had no common sense in those decisions. They were trying to live on Social Security, but they did not take the common sense to say, we ought to do something to take care of ourselves. And I'm not saying that little old lady is in that position, but there are too many people that are lining up for these programs that really don't need them. But the people giving them out, their job is to get new heating systems in as many houses in Cattaraugus County as we can do. As many windows in these houses because it's the right thing to save energy. But these people aren't using any common sense in their lives. They put themselves in the position of wanting all this stuff. And I just think if there was somehow to get people to understand the value of common sense at a younger age and using it in their lives, we'd have a lot less people saying, well, I want this, and this person wants that. Well, how about we can't all have everything? My common sense tells me that. We're all going to have to work together to get what we can get. But when we're giving too much away to people that don't really need it, and the only reason a lot of them need it because they made life's decisions to put themselves in bad positions, and then they're tugging at our hearts, our heartstrings to help them out. When if they would have helped themselves even a little bit,
their roofs wouldn't need replaced because 15 years before they retired, they'd have put a 30-year roof on their house when they were working, but they just let it, oh, it's not that bad, but let's go down to the American Legion and have beers every night of the week, and I like beer. I've been next door, and Tuesdays I ride over here with some of my buddies and have a beer with them, you know. And I'm just saying people don't realize that their life decisions put them in this position.
The commentary, the comments, you're touching on a lot of issues there, cultural, work ethic, individual accountability, responsibility. That's what I was taught. That's what I believe in. So I'm trying to teach my kids. And I think that's a fair comment for us to talk about as a nation. What are we going to promote? What are we going to champion? And it's very tempting for a lot of guys in DC to say, well, I can pass a law and take care of that work ethic problem. It's beyond that. It's more of a core cultural conversation we need to have, and we need to continue to recognize that hard work is the right way to go, and just keep promoting it.
When government continuously rewards people for not thinking ahead, the work ethic is eroded, and I completely agree with what Mel was
I appreciate that. But at the same time, there are going to be people, and just so you understand where I come from, that are going to be in that situation where life throws them a curveball. There's going to be a catastrophe. It's life. That's how it works. And we as a nation have demonstrated repeatedly that we will extend that helping hand to people who need it. And I'm not opposed to that. But where I am opposed is you go too far. And it doesn't become just that, it's the old adage, just you can help, you can teach people to fish or you can give them a fish. I'm a big believer in teaching them to fish. Go ahead, we'll go over here, new voice.
So what about the Affordable Care Act? What can we do to get rid of that? Come up with something that actually makes sense that people can afford? Could we take, I would hate to say make this law because this kind of goes along with what that gentleman said. You should plan ahead in your life for whatever you may need later on in life. But here's an idea, well, if you took 10 or 15% of your earnings every week, put into, I believe they're called healthcare savings accounts. That way, later on, I'm a younger guy, I might need that money later on, there it is. I really do not want any part of the government stepping into my life and telling me what to do at all. Right now, I can't afford health insurance for my family. My employer carries it on me, but I cannot afford it for my family. Even through this Obamacare crap, which is what it is in my own opinion. It's still too expensive. It costs me more to insure my family through that than my house payment. What can we do to get rid of it?
Well,
and paying the fine, why should I have to pay a fine for something that I can't afford?
We're ending on an easy issue, I guess. First of all, you know where I stood on the issue of the Affordable Care Act. I stood for repeal of it. I think it's going down a path that's not going to end well. And the train wreck, quote unquote, that it's been described, I think we're seeing it and it's happening. Are we going to be able to repeal it? The President's made it very clear. And I'll agree with him on this statement. He says elections have consequences. He was reelected. And to repeal it, you don't have the veto, you can't overcome his veto. It's just a practical situation that we are faced with right now. So, well, hopefully, but I mean, there are things going on right now that are impacting real people. And they recognize it. The President recognizes it. There's a reason he's extending this stuff by executive order. It's not coming together like they thought, so to speak. And so I hear the issue and I'm the eternal optimist. So what this will force, in my opinion, is us as a country to get into the conversation of how to drive down health care costs. Because whatever you feel about the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, one thing that I think they focused on, they did do some things on costs and very small, it was more about health insurance. I'm really interested in having the debate across America, how we're gonna drive these costs down of health care. You know, how to make them more transparent, so you actually know what it costs when you go to the doctors or to the hospital. Not the transaction behind the scenes that no one knows what's going on. Allowing folks to be able to negotiate, doctors to be able to negotiate with carriers and providers, and having that as a more open ability to bring in the competitive market forces into the situation. Utilization, like you talked about with the health savings account, having your own resources to deploy down the road. That is something I think merits a lot of attention and discussion. The concept of tort reform, I mean, I'm a believer in it. I support tort reform. But this is, again, what elected officials will do who want to just talk to you on sound bites. Tort reform is not going to solve the problem. It will be part of the solution to the problem and limiting defensive medicine and things like that. But anybody who comes in and says, I got the solution, it's tort reform, and that will take care of everything. We need to do it. We need to support tort reform, but we have to do more on this issue. But I appreciate the input. I appreciate the idea. But we're hearing story after story. I mean, folks losing hours because they're getting under the 30-hour threshold. That's real money coming out of people's pockets. The not being able to keep the health insurance plan as they were promised under the lie of the year, quote unquote. The premium notices that are going up. The impacts that are going to happen probably in June, July when the risk pool gets quantified. That's going to jack up premiums. People, there's some things coming down the pipeline that we saw the train wreck coming. Now it's coming. Yeah, Kevin.
And watching and listening to everything that's going on here, I mean, I do agree with a lot of the things that have been said. A lot of things that have been, I do agree with. Now there has it completely right. Common sense is something a lot of people just don't have. I know many people who go out there, get done with their job, you go out to the bar, spend your money, everything else there. No big deal. As far as raising minimum wage to me is one thing that's the most inflationary, counterproductive thing that we can do. Based on the fact that 40 years ago, when I got married the first time, I got under $75 a month minimum wage. I think it was either $235 or $265. My electric bill, our budget was $13 a month. Gas bill was $15. Cable was $11 for 2 months. Phone bill, I think, was like $12 or $13. Now minimum wage is up to $8, which is, when you multiply that times 4, the prices have gone up. So the day before, where my wife works, one of the convenience stores, the day before minimum wage went up, the price of gas went up 5 cents. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. It is very counterproductive. She's in a position that puts it above minimum wage. But when minimum wage went from $7.25 to $8, those people got a $75, $7 raise. Do you think she got a $75, $7 raise? You think the people that were making, like $7.75, they got a 75-cent raise to put them up that much further over minimum wage? No, it doesn't happen. What's the price of the McDonald's hamburger now? I was just used 40 years ago, where the minimum wage was, it was like 20 cents, 25 cents. Now a burger truck, just a standard burger, $1.19, $1.29. It doesn't make sense to me.
I've been trying to stay away from the hamburgers. I'm 110 pounds down, so
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay away from them.
Congratulations.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
But like I said, I'm in a situation, yes, I am one of these people who get Social Security disability. Don't like it, but my wife works. If I had my way, I would much rather be out there working. And that's the bottom line. But I've got a few issues
Yeah, Kevin.
in the list. But the fact is, I sit there and I file my own taxes. I made a mistake here a few years ago. And it'll cost me money. I didn't get on it, I just got a bill, $1,600. And I come to find out there's something I thought that it wasn't that big a deal. I went through it, it's paid off. But they sit there, they held it for $1,600 or $2,000 for someone who's got a disability and someone who's maybe 50 cents an hour over minimum wage. And then it gives the funding back to the IRS so they can pay their employee bonuses of about $68 million. I know you were on that committee, so I see you the other day. And to me, it just infuriates the hell out of me. Well, I had to sit there and struggle, and I almost lost my home over there. And luckily, I've got people that go to work. I mean, $2,000 isn't a lot of money to somebody, but to a lot of people, it is a lot of money. And the fact is, like Moses, these people would much rather go down to the Legion and VFW and get some working, wake up their money.
Well,
worry about it later.
Well, and I appreciate it, Kevin, I appreciate it. I mean, one thing that I am concerned about, and we're seeing it across the country, is I don't want us to become a country where it's against each other. You know, you're bad, we're all in this together at the end of the day. And so we try, you don't see rhetoric coming out of my mouth where I'm trying to say those people or somebody else. I mean, we're all in this at the end of the day, and if it means we gotta talk about removing the Social Security tax, just so we all know what we're doing. And we come together and get it done. So anyway, I appreciate the comments. I appreciate you coming out today. Okay, I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you.
County, appreciate it very much. This is a great room, actually. I didn't realize the room was this big and deserted, so let's see something else.
That's a big room.
Yeah,
No doubt about it.
Well,
Thanks, guys,
Thanks
very
very
much.
much for coming. Appreciate it.
Enjoy the rest of the day.